Hello, welcome to my show, You Throughout the Years. Here we will have conversations with ordinary persons like you and me. Everyone has a story, either good or bad, funny or sad. So come and reminisce with us as we find out how these years have shaped our lives. And I am so blessed to have my sister, my friend, my prayer warrior, everything that is for God. My sister, Casey Detox Diva.
Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
Casey Detox. Can you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hello, everybody. It is so wonderful and amazing to be here. Do you know how blessed this lady is and how she blesses so many people? I can't even tell y'all how much. I started crying before I even got on here. But anyway, my name is Casey Detox Diva, or my family and friends call me Michelle. I am a holistic motivator. I'm a prayer warrior. I believe in positivity. And on my channel, as long as it's positive, we do just about anything there. We also teach about how to identify things that are negative so that it will empower you to be positive. And so the more you know, the better you are as far as maturity level. And the more you understand how negativity works, the more positive that you can become. So we are all about empowering ourselves, empowering each other, inspiring ourselves. And so I am 51 years old, and I am from Kansas City, Missouri in the States, but I live in Florida, the sunny state. And I am I work in IT, so I work in a hospital, and I absolutely love what I do, and I appreciate being here to be interviewed. And so I hope that something I says resonates with you, and that it inspires you, motivates you in some kind of way.
So the first question is to you. What is the earliest age you can remember yourself?
I remember being 4 years old, or maybe I was 4 to 6 years old. I remember being in my mom's arms, wearing a little white dress, being the only child, and just being spoiled rotten. I remember going to church every Sunday, even though I was only 4 to 6. I remember going to church with my grandpa, and I remember loving it as a child. You know, we was at church whenever the doors were open, probably 4 or 5 days a week. So I remember that as a young child.
Okay. It seems that a lot of guests remember 4. So there have to be something with this 4. Did your family tell you when did you start to walk and talk?
I don't remember when I started walking, but I was talking. I'm a talker. I've been a talker since I can remember. I even graduated from high school. I was voted most talkative. Okay. So it comes in handy now.
Yes,
So I've
true.
been talking a long time. In full sentences. I mean, I've been talking for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. But I don't I don't know about the walking part. I was kind of a fat baby, so I like to eat.
Oh, so that's part of the getting spoiled.
Yes.
Chunky
I am
baby.
still a foodie. I'm still a foodie now, you guys. Oh my goodness.
Okay. What was your attitude like in your, say, 4 to 12? Who was Michelle?
So I was a know-it-all. My mother used to say all the time, you talk too much, you never shut up, you need to stay in a child's place, because, when adults were talking, I was always somewhere lurking or listening, always. And people would ask me the question, how do you know that? And I'm like, I don't know. Nobody ever told me. I never seen it. I just never knew how I knew, but I know that now it's a gift from God that he's
Mm.
given me to be a resource, you know.
Mm. Persons will say that was you were just being a nosy, malicious child. But yes, sometimes they cannot see the gift in some of these things when you are a child. So
But that's how
you,
we identify the kids. You know, we got kids now that we see they nosy and they did, but because I've seen that in myself,
yeah,
I can look at that child and go, okay, but they probably are gifted. They know that. Wow, you know. So I
yeah,
can see it better now because I was that child.
yeah. So do you have siblings?
I have my mom had four children. I'm the oldest of the four. I have a brother. I have a sister, and then my youngest sister. She died almost 13 years ago at 23 on a really bad car accident. And on my
Very
dad's
sorry.
side, I have. Thank you. On my dad's side, I have two sisters. No, God gracious, three sisters, a brother, and then I had another brother who died at 17, about 30 years ago, 40
Oh,
years ago.
sorry again about that. Oh, death. Where is your sting? How was your relationship with your parents during 4 to 12, your childhood age?
4 to 12, or
Mhm.
just okay?
Uh,
So 4 to 12, I didn't know my father at all. I
okay.
didn't know my father until my adult. I was probably in my 40s when I learned who my father was. Um, at the age of 4 to 7, no, 4 to 9, I thought my stepfather was my father. My mother never told me otherwise. My brother and sister's father, I thought he was my dad. Um, he was a drug addict, and he was a criminal. So a lot, and he was a woman beater. So my relationship, I didn't have one with him. I feared him. You know, my mom was in a relationship with this man from the time I was probably 6 months old until he died at when I was 9. And I used to see things I never should have seen as a young child. And so my mother was dating him right after she got pregnant with me. Um, and he just wasn't a good person at all. He was a really bad person. And my mother was stuck in a relationship. She tried to leave, and he found her, and he made our life hell. So,
Mm.
but my mother, on our relationship now is good, but as a child, I was kind of a pawn. I was the oldest child, so but when I was 4, before my brother was born, 4 years, I was spoiled from the age of 4 till 8, 7 or 8, and then my brother was born, and then my sister was born, and then my other sister was born, so that I became the parent to my brothers
Oh,
and sisters.
okay. I understand that. I'm very sorry you grew up in that having the fear your living environment. I have to fear your appearance at that time.
Well, he died. He
You thought
died,
this was
and
your father.
yeah, I thought he was. I didn't find out it wasn't my father until I read his obituary. Now I'm
Oh.
9 years old, very smart, and when he died, I hate to say this, but I was so happy because we lived in fear. We lived in squalor. He was not a good person to my mother or to us. He took money from my mom, took money out of our mouths. He came and gone as he pleased. He had children with other people. He had other girlfriends. And so when he passed away when I was 9, I read his obituary and my name wasn't in it. And so I went to my mother and said, well, it's not fair. Why is my name not here? And she said, well, he wasn't your father. That's how I found out he wasn't my father. And at that time, when she told me he was not my father, you could see like a deflated balloon where the air that I had been holding inside of me for so many years, like I couldn't breathe. I actually exhaled for the first time from the time I can remember. So I was joyful
Mm.
And I know that sounds terrible to say, but I was joyful as a 9-year old saying, thank God he's not here anymore, because now, he will stop beating my mother and stop doing these things to our family.
Yeah, I can understand that you are feeling happy that you do not have his blood.
Yes.
Because as you said, as at 9 year old, you understand the ties with blood and family and things. So just getting that news was the best thing at
At that
that
time.
time.
Yes.
At that time.
He was never abusive to me. He never sexually abused or physically abused me at all. But it was all verbal. And, seeing him, what he did to my mother, and, the things that he did as far as drugs. You know what I mean? He would say things to me when he was on drugs that was not for a child to hear. So I had to grow up really fast.
Yeah. So, and that is still abuse.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's emotional abuse. How did this affect your school life?
Well, it's kind of, I have to go back to my age of 6 and say that I was hit by a car when I was 6 years old. I was a latchkey kid, and in America, what that means is I got a key at the age of 6, and I would walk home from school, let myself in until my mother got home. So I was basically raised myself, and I got hit by a car because a dog was chasing me. So after that, my life never was the same. I was sickly from that point on. I had this illnesses that were dormant that accident brought out. And so from that moment on, from 6 till now, I have gone through a lot with different symptoms and illnesses, and didn't get diagnosed until I was 40 years old.
Mm.
So it was very difficult childhood because I was in the hospital and the doctor a lot. They never could diagnose me. They treated the symptom, but they never looked at the overall everything to say, okay, so she had this issue. She got hit by a car. So a concussion, a double concussion. And so they never connected the things up together. They just treated this symptom, medication. My whole life has just been the symptom, and that's it. So it's been challenging as a child. I couldn't do a lot of the things that other kids could do.
And even at this time, they did not say that you should even get counseling.
Counseling, as far as
Having that accident and dealing with school and being sick and missing school, they did not recommend you being counseled or anything.
the only thing I did was go to physical therapy with my leg, because I had a cast from my waist all the way down to my toe for 9 weeks. So the only thing I ever did as a child was go to physical therapy. No, unfortunately, I have to say that and I know that other people of color would probably agree with this, that back then they didn't believe in going to counseling and, seeking out therapists and psychologists. You went to church and you gave it to God, and so that was your counselor. You didn't have someone that you paid. My mother didn't really have the money for that. So they would pay for the medication and the doctor's visits, but they weren't paying for any counseling or anything like that. You had to go to church and get that if you wanted some kind of counseling, which, that's what we did.
Yeah, that's the go-to Black person
Yes.
thing, especially. During this time, how was your family? How was your family affected by the accident?
Well, immediately, my immediate family, I call him my stepfather. My stepfather was still living at that point because I was 6. My mother worked a job. And so I remember having a nurse that came into the house every day. I was very happy, even though I had this issue, because I remember getting a teacher that would come and teach me every single day. They would come in and teach me at home. I remember all the students from my class coming down and bringing a big old card, and they bought all kinds of stuff. And so I remember people coming, like the elderly couple who hit me, even though it wasn't their fault. They paid for my treatment. They came to the hospital. They came to my house. Um, Even though I was a latchkey kid, the neighbors knew I was a latchkey kid. So the neighbors, they helped out my mom, because she had to work. And so we had a small village in the area where we lived. And so even though I laid on the couch every day, there was always somebody there around. My aunties and my uncles were kind of around. I don't remember. They were coming around. I don't remember them taking care of me, but I don't know for sure. But I do remember my aunts and uncles and cousins. People were always around. People bringing food over. So it wasn't. It was bad because I was in a lot of pain, but it was good because I had support system at that time.
Support is really needed and
Yes.
appreciated. We're going to leave your childhood and we're going into your teenage years
Okay.
now.
All
And that
right.
is your teenage from 13 to 19. Try to remember everything. So we know this is a time of being confused because a lot of feelings, thought are going swirling in your mind and your body. How did you navigate this new Michelle that was emerging?
I hear a lot of people who talk about their teen years in certain ways, and mine was very unusual because of the illness. You know what I mean? Like I said, as a child, I couldn't go do a lot of things. And so as a teenager, um, I was sick a lot. I was left behind at home a lot. I missed a lot of school. I barely graduated from high school because I was always sick. So the age of 13 was a sad time for me because my grandfather was my everything. My mom was the youngest of seven children. So by the time I was 13, my grandfather was in his 70s. And
Mhm.
so he had pancreatic cancer and he passed away. So he was my June. That's what we called him. June was everything to me. And so when he died, it just, he was kind of my saving grace. I would always be at his house. He's the one that taught me how to cook. The nurturing from him is why I'm who I am right now. My mother was very young when she had me. Her mother died when she was 3, so she never really had that nurturing spirit. And my grandfather worked 2 jobs all the time. So by the time I came along, her brothers and sisters were already out of the house. And so after he passed away, I could do pretty much, my mother let me do whatever I wanted to.
Okay.
Luckily for me, I still had that church instilled in me, because there are some things that I could have done, but I didn't do. You know what I mean? As a teenager, that
Mhm.
rebellion. I was the one that cooked, most of the meals in the house. My mother was always gone. She loved the party. She was having her teen time, her being a single mother and
Mhm.
young, she was out in the streets. So I became the parent in the household at a young age. I remember at 15 lying to get a job.
Mhm.
So I was supposed to be 16, but that's that's when we learned how to change the birth certificate to the right age.
Okay.
And I got a job at Taco Bell, and I used to work a lot. Um, I missed out on going to like games, and I went to a couple of dances, but I really didn't have like a high school childhood or whatever. Um, I used to pay my mom's rent because she didn't finish high school, so she had a hard time with things, and so I would help her. So that's why I say I helped my mom a lot, and then I was raising my brother and sister. She didn't have that tenacity to be able to do some things, and so I became like the caregiver of my mother, even though she was in her 20s and 30s. And so I was much more mature, than most teenagers, because I had a job from 15 and I've worked a job ever since then. and I took care of my family. And when everybody was out going skating, now my favorite thing was to skate. Now I love to skate. My uncle used to take us skating every Saturday and Sunday, but outside of that, I sacrificed a lot for my family. I didn't do a lot of stuff that other teenagers did. I even found a church family where we used to live. I didn't know these people. We got to know them, and the church bus would pick us up. So I would get my brother and sisters ready. My mother would just be coming in from, being at the club all night, and we would be going to church. So my mother never went to church, but my grandfather instilled in me to go to church. So I still, even though I wasn't pushed to go to church, that's something that was instilled in me. So at the age of 16, I'm taking my brothers and sisters to church.
And do you think that if you did not have your grandfather and his teaching and only your mother to depend on, do you think that your life will be what it is now?
I think about all the decisions I've made in life. Now, I've done some dumb teenager things. There's a lot of stuff that I was naive about that I didn't know any better because my mother didn't teach me. You know what I mean? So if you look at the things that I didn't know about, and then also if my grandfather, I would probably have had several children at a young age. That's what I believe. I mean, I know there's been some moments in my life where, I could have made a decision to go this way, but I decided to go this way instead. And that was a deciding factor. Having a boy in the house, and you ain't supposed to have a boy in the house. And, even though he was there, we didn't do anything because I wouldn't let him do that. You know what I mean? But, I just think about, my grandfather teaching us about sin and about, fornication. Not saying that didn't happen in my life, but in my younger years, I was able to kind of do some things that were not necessarily something my parent would want me to do, but it was innocent enough that I never really had the consequences of a baby or disease or whatever. I never skipped school, never did that. I was afraid. So for overall, I was a pretty good kid. I was sneaky, but I did some things, but for the most part, I was a good kid.
Thank the Lord for your grandfather.
Yes.
Yes, and his influence in your life. In your teenage, as you said, that sickness was a big part of your life. Seeing a lot of school. Did you get a chance to be in a special relationship with anyone?
When I was in school?
Yeah.
Yes. So I lived in a complex from the time I was 13 until I was 18. So when I moved to that complex, I have a childhood best friend that I still talk to. I have another best friend that I knew since I was 16 to now that I've still talked to. Her parents were a very huge influence. So even though my grandfather was deceased and we moved to these apartments, a lot of the parents in the complex, that's where I met the couple who I was going to church with. But a lot of parents in the complex were, they were like that godparent or that aunt or uncle, that I didn't have around. So, they kept us in check. If they saw us doing something, they knew my mother and they would tell her, or they would chastise us on their own. Back then they didn't care nothing about telling your parent. They would get you and spank your butt, because you in the neighborhood and you doing something you ain't got no business. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time at my friend's house when I was able to. A lot of both of my friends. If I didn't want to cook at home or we didn't have food, I would go to my friend's house and eat. Have my brother and sister sometimes, they would be with me. And so, I had there was a huge village. Every day from the time I was 13 till 18, we hung out in our apartment complex doing whatever, you know what I mean? So those are happier times for me, even though my mom wasn't there a lot. She was really, I don't know. Luckily for me, I have a different relationship with her now, but back then I was a little bit resentful because she left me to take care of her children, and she would go out of town for weeks at a time, and she would not pay the bills, and then I would have to figure out what had to eat because there was no food. And so there was a lot of resentment, but there was a lot of joy too, because we had the people across the hall, the people downstairs, we had the people, I had another girlfriend who lives in North Carolina. That's where she lives now. Her and her mom lived across the street. So we had a village all around us. And I think that's what made my life so much better, because we had that village. If we hadn't lived there, I don't know what I would have done. So, I commend all those parents and my friends I'm still friends with, for being a very important part of my life.
Yes. And I'm happy that you had at least some good times that you can look back on.
We all have challenges, you know what I mean? Something in life, and so, I can look at that and say, it was some bad times, but it could have been way worse than what it was. It actually, I look back and go, it molded me into who I am.
Right. Leaving your teenage years and you're going to go into your 20s. What did you take away from your teenage years into your 20s that either you say that you want to continue having, and what did you throw away, you can say?
So the one thing that I can say is I did have a lot of resentment to my mom, and I couldn't wait to get away from her because I was the go-to. I was the person that she always made do everything. You know what I mean? And I know we moved past my teen years, but there's one thing in particular. I was in college and I only lasted a semester because my mother calls me and she blames me for not paying the rent, not being there to pay the rent, and us getting evicted. Well, I used to go get a money order and pay the rent. Well, she went and took the money directly to them. And the lady actually ended up embezzling money. They found out later. But she gave the lady the money, and there was no documentation that my mother gave any of the money. And so she ended up getting put out because this lady took the money and said she didn't pay. She blamed it on me and made me leave school to be homeless with them.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that, I had a lot of resentment because school was like an exhale for me. Even though I was sick and going through, I was healthy because I felt empowered. I felt, confident. My uncle lived in the city where my school was. So, I had freedom that I had never had before. And so to take that away was hard for me.
When you all was, say, homeless, how did you get other housing, and how was your siblings' attitude towards you and their mother?
Well, the kids, you never brought the kids into the situation. They really did. My brother and sister I was 17, 18, and my brother was 4 years younger, so he was 14, and my sister was 6 years younger than me, so she was 12, and then my baby sister was 3. So at the time when we became homeless, we ended up going to stay at a family friend's house. And then my mom's boyfriend, he ended up finding us this house, but it was so terrible. It didn't have a basement. It had a crawl space. So we had big old rats that would come into our house. We sitting there watching TV and the rats were in the kitchen, bigger than the cats. The cats were afraid of them, and so my poor brother never had a bedroom. It was always a 2-bedroom house, and so he always had to sleep on the couch. That was his life. He slept on the couch from the time I can remember until maybe until I moved out. He might have got my old bedroom once I moved out, but he always ended up on the couch. He never had a bedroom. And so me and my sister, my youngest sister, not my youngest, the middle sister, we had a room together, but she peed in the bed, so she smelled. She didn't say, so I just kept thinking, I got to get out of here. I don't like, I love my family, but I felt like I was drowning. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so I just felt like I could never get a come up when I
Yeah.
was, I didn't know how. I wasn't taught about credit. I wasn't taught about bank accounts. I didn't know anything about like striving for the best or motivation. I didn't know anything about education. And I tried to go to college, but I had a learning disability. So I had a learning
Mm.
disability since I was in high school. So I had this learning disability, and in my mind, I could do it. But then when I got there, I couldn't orchestrate it. So even if
Mm.
my mom hadn't pulled me out of college, I would eventually had to drop out anyway because
Okay.
I wasn't ready, mentally prepared to go back to school. But before I moved to California, the reason why I left is because I got married at a young age.
Okay.
This is funny. I was 19 when I met him. He was a minister of song at this church. And, I was in church a lot. So we were always doing conferences. So he was in church. We met in church. And after 11 months, we got married. So we got married right before I turned 20. And we got an annulment right before I turned 20.
Uh, uh, You got married before, just when you turned 20,
Yes.
and get a normal
Annulment.
before you 20 to 20?
At 20. I literally was married probably a couple of months. And he was not who he said he was. In
Mm.
private, he was a monster. In public, he would sing at the funerals, he would sing at the churches, everybody knew him, he was well known. And so he was a sweetheart in public, but when you got behind closed doors, he was a monster. And
Mm.
I remember he did a lot of stuff. I won't go into all the things he did, but I will say that the reason why I left town is because I was being attacked by all of these different people at churches because he told them I did stuff. I played on him and did, even though he was the one that cheated on me, he told all of them that I cheated on him. And so, I can tell you to this day, there are some ladies from the church back in the day that don't like me because of what
Mhm.
he told them, even though it was a lie. So I left town. That was one of the other reasons why I left, because it was foolishness. You know what I mean? He
Mm.
told these lies. So
Yeah. So you said you came from trauma, abuse to trauma and abuse in a short span of time, because 19 years, you're a child. You
yes.
haven't lived as yet.
So from 20 years old, one of my good friends that I knew from the complex, she ended up getting married and moving to California. Well, as soon as I had an opportunity, I bought a round trip ticket to go visit her in California. I had never flown, never been anywhere. And I came to California I think I was there a month maybe. And I ended up flying back home, and I was so resentful. I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be gone from here. I feel like, you know, that I'm being used up and spit out. That's where I feel. And so I remember my oldest son's father, we hit it off like big time in California. And I remember him calling me saying he missed me. He wanted me to come back, and he sent me a one-way ticket. I was like, adios, gotta go. And I left, and I didn't come back home until I was pregnant the next year. So I ended up having to come home because I was very, very sick. Now, I didn't know I was sick. Remember, all this time, all this stuff is going on. But when I got pregnant, the bottom fell out. And
Okay.
I actually left with that against doctor's advice and got on a plane and came home because I was so sick. My son's father, not even a few months after I came to California, he ended up getting stationed in Korea. So he ended up leaving. I didn't
Mm.
know I was pregnant, and I got deathly sick. Had a fever of 105. I almost died. I had kidney failure. And they didn't want to admit me because I didn't have insurance. So they let me go home. I got sick again. I had to go back, and they gave me medicine. They didn't check me for pregnancy like they do now. They check you for pregnancy. But back then, that wasn't the protocol. So they were giving me medicine that could have made me sick. Well, it did make me sick. It could have killed my child. But my son
Mhm.
is a blessing and a miracle. He was 11 pounds, almost 11 pounds when he was born.
Wow.
And yes. And so,
That's in the family.
yeah,
Chunky babies.
he was a big baby. So even though all of that happened, I ended up back in Kansas City, back at my mother's house. And, I just never seemed like I was ever was able to get out of that rut or that, that poor, we were poor and, struggling to make it, her being a single mother. And my stepdad was my mom's boyfriend. He was around, but he worked in clubs, drank. My mother was at the club all the time because that's where he worked. So, it was just one of those things where I just couldn't seem to get out of that situation. I ended up back at home with my mom after I had my child.
Did you find what you wanted to do in life? Did you go back to school, or did anything deter you or push you towards what you wanted to do?
Yes, my son. Um, when I could tell you that I walked in my most of my life, um, sleep,
Mm.
literally out here because I was in so much pain and so much suffering that I was numb. You know what I mean? So I walked like a zombie pretty much. I mean, but I can tell you that when my son was born, he was my purpose. And I remember he was born in April, and I said, now it's time for me to figure out how to have a house for me and him. How can I get a job? What can I do? And so I remember one of my friends worked at this complex, and she put my name to the top of the waiting list. So I ended up getting a Section 8 house where I only paid like $12 a month. And so I was able to take care of my child. Now, I have no regrets from being on Section 8 welfare or anything because I was sickly, but I feel like if you need help from the government, you use it as a way of a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally got my apartment in September. I started looking for work. I was not satisfied with just being on welfare, getting food stamps every month. I was not satisfied. I was not happy. So I remember someone told me about a job opening, and so at a grocery store. And so I went to Aldi's and I got a job. And I didn't have a car. So I remember having to take 2 buses to work and then take a cab home at night. That's how determined I was that I was going to get off welfare and I was going to have a job. Well, I didn't have a babysitter. And I remember having to walk my son in the snow in a stroller up a hill to a friend's house so that she could keep him so that I could go to work. And so
Mm.
I paid her little or nothing. So there was a lot of like determination and perseverance at that moment because this is my son. I have to make a better life for us. And literally, I remember one day I was riding the bus, and I remember the bus driver said, "Hey, that lady over there has a car that she's been trying to sell. You should get off the bus and go over." Now, I'm stepping out on faith because if I get off this bus, I have to wait until this next bus comes.
Yeah.
So I stepped out on faith and I went and knocked on her door. And I said, "I heard you had a car for sale." And she said, "Yeah, my kids bought me this car and I don't drive, and it's just been sitting there for 2 years. I want $600 for it." And I said, "Well, all I have is $400. I said, "I have a son. I got a job. I take 2 buses to work and I take a cab home, and that's eating up all of my money." And I said, "I really need a car." She said, "I'll sell it to you for 400." So she sold me the car. This is a month after I got my job, my first paycheck. And I took that and I got the car. My uncle came, looked at it. Car was in perfect shape. He tuned it up, fixed it up. And there was another girl who used to take a cab home with me. She was a single mom too. So she used to pay me to take her home instead of paying the cab driver. So I was able to make gas money
Yeah.
and have a car, take care of my son. And I actually got a real babysitter at night to take care of my child. This lady started taking care of my son when he was less than a year old. And she took care of him until he didn't have a babysitter. He didn't need a babysitter. He could stay home. So he was in his life until he was like 12 or 13. And then, so she's been in his life for in our life, she's still in our life, but 13 years until he would stay home. And then my youngest son came along 5 years later. She took care of him all the way up until he was 12 or whatever. You know what I mean? So I had the same babysitter for many, many, many years, like family. They were like family to me. So my kids called her Aunt Belle because she was the auntie. She took care of my children. So she was a very big part of my kids' upbringing. She took them to church. She took care of them. She treated them like her own children. Sometimes my kids didn't want to come home because they wanted to stay at Aunt Belle's, and she would let them. She took care of them on the weekend. She took care of them if I wanted to take a vacation. She has always just been a very huge part of their life.
And we're so thankful that although we might be going through a tough time, there is one person always comes that we can depend on. So
yes,
so I'm glad you had
Aunt Belle. And do you know that because of that, getting that car and Aunt Belle being my babysitter, that I actually was able to get a job at the hospital, which I worked at for 26 years. So 1 month after getting the car, 1 month after working, I only worked at that job for a whole month. And then I ended up getting a job at the hospital. And I've been working in healthcare ever since.
Now we're going to go in your 30s, a time when we're supposed to know ourselves better and know what career we want and what we want to do in life. So did your 30s got better or worse for you?
You know, I was a late bloomer in life. And I've always said this, like I said, I wasn't really taught, just like my mother wasn't taught. She had to basically find out things the hard way. I had to find things the hard way. The one thing I will say is that even though I was sickly, I worked a lot. I did hair. I used to braid hair. So I had, even though I would only make like $8 an hour at my job at the hospital, I would make $1,000 a week doing hair.
Okay.
I used to clean houses. So I had I had people who were on disability, and they would pay me whatever they could, and I would help them clean the house. That was my way of giving back. So those times were tough because I didn't really have a career. I had a job. But I had a lot of determination and perseverance in my life. I mean, I just think about all the trials and tribulations, relationships, a lot of bad relationships, but a lot of things that were taught. I have no regrets from those relationships other than because of what I saw as a child and what I went through being married and then annulled, because legally under the state of Kansas, I've never been married. Because after you get annulment, that means you've never been married. But in the eyes of God, I got married to this man, and I told myself I would never marry again unless it is God led. And that's why I've never married. So I put all of my time into my kids. I have a youngest son who's autistic. And so from the time he was born, when I was 27, it was difficult. Very, very, very hard life for us because he had issues with, sound and seeing and verbal. He had incognizance and a lot of things wrong with him. He couldn't speak. He was nonverbal. So we had a lot of like behavioral issues. And so when I say numb, I was numb because I had to do it. I didn't have a choice as my child, but there was a lot of struggle. I didn't have time to figure out what I wanted to do with my life because I had to take care of these kids. I had to make sure they ate. I had to make sure we had a roof over our heads. I had to make sure my youngest son, I was a huge advocate for him because in our school district where I lived, you know, some parents didn't know how to advocate. So I became a parent advocate for a lot of the kids that had special needs because I was determined that they were not going to treat my child like just the next kid.
Mhm.
So for years, that was my focus. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my job. It wasn't about none of that. It was about my kids. It was about making sure they had food, that they had a roof over their head, and that my kids were being treated the way that they are supposed to be treated. So everything that had to do with me was put on the back burner because my kids came first.
Did you at any time feel that you can't get a break
Yes,
from,
all the time.
yeah, hearing your story, is a bit heavy. Yeah, so I know you know you get your youngest son, and he's different.
Yes.
Nothing is wrong with him. He's
So,
just different. And it takes a lot from any parent, any guardian to deal with children who have any type of disability, right?
yeah, I remember putting him in a psychiatric ward because he tried to jump over an atrium. But he said, I don't want to die. He couldn't stand the noise. He would pat his head and, people consider my son a bad kid, because of his behaviors. And so through all of that, that's where Casey Detox Diva came from. My kids drove that. They were the drivers. I remember taking my youngest son to a urologist and him telling me that he says, you have to stop giving your kids red dye. Red dye allergy is huge, especially in boys, and it causes behavior issues. So you need to start reading the labels, looking at what's going in your food, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I didn't realize I used to have really bad allergies as well. And I would have hives and didn't know that I was having reactions from food. And so because of my youngest son's problems, I was able to see the things in my own life. It took a while, but I was able to, teach him about food, about, red dye. And I can tell you that's real, and so no milk because, milk is not good for kids with autism, and dairy products. And, we slowed down on the meat. I no longer eat meat, but my son, he didn't eat pork or none of that stuff. So I can say the behaviors and life change, but you had to be engaged. You had to pay attention. You had to focus on that child. But because I focused on him to see what he needed, literally those things that I was doing for him came back and they ended up being something that I needed for myself, which is where the Casey Detox Diva came from.
You're going through all of that was a blessing.
Yes.
Sometimes you will say this is a curse, but it became a blessing because
Yes.
your health was improved somewhat by improving your son's life.
Yes.
We're going to visit your 40s, and and that is a time with that familiar saying, living your best life. At any time, did your children bring sadness to you? And did you meet sorrow in your life?
I can't say that my kids did something that brought sadness to my life. Maybe my oldest son, but it was later. It's like current not current, but like it was in my 40s, late 40s, but he's overcome. You know what I mean? Those are things that he was dealing with in his life that he never shared with me. And so I can say that at the in my 40s, the saddest thing that happened to me, my sister at 23 and I was 40, I was 39. She died. She was in a really bad car accident where her car flew off a bridge. It flung her out of the car. The car landed on the street below, and she died from internal injuries. And so my sister, I raised her. So my mother will tell you, she was like my daughter. So even though, I had two sons that I birthed, my sister, I nurtured her. I loved her. She was like a daughter to me. And so I mourned my sister like she was my child. And I saw a lot of things that happened to her within her eyes, like I was there with her. And I told my mother exactly how she passed away. And I remember waking up at 3:16 every day for 3 days and didn't know why, and kept asking everybody why. And I remember going to church to her funeral, and one of our cousins who's a minister started reading John 3:16. And I started screaming, that's it. And so my sister dying so I could live. I had always been the person that never let them see you sweat. You should be strong. You don't let anybody see you cry. You don't, you get them before they get you. That was my attitude, because I look at all of the relationships, my mom's relationship with my brother and sister's father, my mom's relationship with the current man that was cheating on her, my cousin who had a cheater on her, my other aunt who was a cheater, who had a boyfriend, one aunt who had a husband who was a cheater. And so I took a stance and I chose that I was not going to be cheated on. I was not going to be mistreated, and I'm not going to get married. They can, even though I had been engaged once, but I ran. And so, all of these happenings in my life. And so at that point, it was just like, when she died, all of the tears, all of the pain, all of the suffering, everything that I went through from the time I was hit by that car until that day when she died, all came out all at one time. I cried probably for a whole year, every single day, all day. I would just be at work and I would just start crying. And I remember, and I started thinking, I never questioned God why he took her. But when I would tell people she died so I could live, I realized that I had been put up this huge wall.
Yes.
It was all the way up here, and that no love could get out and no love could get in. That I had sheltered myself, and I didn't trust people. And so my sister passing away was probably the most, I had never lost anybody in my life. Like I lost her. I lost my grandpa. That was different, but losing her was profound. And I know she's my guardian angel even right now. When she died, that's when my life changed. That's when I let God in my heart. That's when things really did a major turnabout for me. I told myself that she's no longer here. I can't squander my future anymore. I have to live according to God's purpose he has in my life. And my sister was in college, and I actually was in college too at the time when she died. But it just reiterated to me that I needed to live for her because she's not here anymore. And so when I let God guide my steps, and I graduated from college at the age of 40 years old. And that was about a year and a half after she passed away. And before that, right before she passed away, God had told me I was going to go to school, buy a house, and get married. And he told me that in my sleep because he said, I don't listen. I don't give him enough time. So he talked to me in my sleep and told me that. And I was like, whatever.
Mhm.
But after she passed away and I got my associate's degree, not even a few months after I got my associate's degree, I got my first house. And so then I went back to school. I told myself I was never going back to school after I graduated in 2010, but September 2010, I ended up back in school with my bachelor's.
Amen. Amen.
And I was diagnosed the same year with Chiari malformation, which is a brain disorder where your brain herniates down into your spinal column. So after all these years, I finally got a diagnosis, and I ended up having brain surgery March of 2011. And then not even a month after I got my surgery, even though I had lots of complications and issues and problems, I said, I can't take off any more time. I need to finish because I have things to do. There is a plan for my life. And so I went back to school, even though I was still in pain. I was still suffering, even after surgery, because they had been like 40 years stopped up in my brain, my spinal fluid. So I would lay down and do papers. I was determined. And when I graduated with my bachelor's, 3.43 GPA.
Amen.
And that's how I tell people, I'm like, it doesn't matter what you go through in your life, no matter how hard it is, if you have the determination and you believe and you trust and believe with all your heart, that it can come true. And so it did come true for me. And I got my bachelor's degree, and I walked across the stage.
And that got me to sing, "To God be the glory."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your 40s was really, you could say you started to live your best life. You
Yes.
went to school,
Yes.
you fought through to finish school in spite of your sicknesses.
Yes.
We're saying your 40s, but we're going closer to your 50s. I know that life can be going on good, and then just it takes one thing to upset the whole apple cart. What difference happened in your later 40s going into your 50s?
So I remember I worked at a hospital, and so I had been in this one department as a customer service rep for like 7 years. So I decided to apply for a job as a financial counselor at a cancer center. So as a financial counselor, you work with patients who have cancer, and you have to tell them they owe money for their cancer. That's a very difficult job, but I felt like I was really good at it, except for the fact that I have an empty sella, and that is where your pituitary gland is smushed. So my cortisol levels are really high, which what it makes for the weight being on you, and also your fight and flight is off, the chemicals is off, so it causes you to have stress. So I didn't realize that was a major factor. I also have a heart condition. It's called POTS. And then I also have a connective tissue disorder. And all of the things that I have came out of the connective tissue disorder, which is hereditary, which is what I was born with. But I didn't get diagnosed with that until later after the Chiari. But anyway, so there's so many things that happened in my 40s. I remember losing my job because the stress was so bad. You would talk to the patients. Some of them would be upset. Some of them would go off. But the ones that touched me the most were the ones that, they paid every month and then they end up dying. You talk to them, you got a relationship with them, and then they would die. It was hard on me. And I remember going out on disability because I was stressed. And I remember never going back to work because my FMLA ran out. And when it runs out, they give your job to somebody else. They don't fire you, but they give your job to somebody else. So the FMLA, which is family medical leave, they give you 3 months of it. Once it runs out, they say that they can't guarantee you a job. And so basically what happened is they gave my job away. I had to go pick up my stuff. And at that point, I was still going through symptoms and problems, lots and lots of stuff, even though I had the surgery. At that point, I had already seen one doctor as a secondary consultation, and he told me that I had pseudotumor cerebri, which is another brain issue that causes you to have blood pressure issues, weight problems, all these different things going on. And so it's overwhelming because there's nothing I can do about all of this. All of these symptoms are coming through, these problems, these diagnoses. And then I would hear people say, oh my gosh, I don't see how you deal with that. And it's like, I don't have a choice. This is who I am. And so I remember applying for disability and got denied. So then I said, okay, forget about that. I just graduated from college. I'm not going on disability. So I took a job just to take a job. And I remember I hated the job. Every day I would have anxiety attacks. I was having panic attacks. It was very stressful. And I remember during all that time, God told me that I was going to move to Florida. And I believe that with all my heart. And I said, believe it, receive it, trust God with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. You don't know how it's going to happen, when, why. So I started applying for jobs in Florida. From the company I was working with, I was trying to get transferred. That wasn't happening. I kept saying, okay, well, I'm going to work overtime so I can save money and just quit. And one day, when I was in my house, because I owned a home in Kansas City, my kids had moved away and it was just me there. God came to me and said, I need you to be bare bones for me. I need you to let go of this stuff because you're moving to Florida. So stepping out and trusting God, I started meditating and praying. I was doing a lot more meditation and prayer. I learned how to do Reiki, which helped me to learn how to meditate and breathe. And the more I was able to breathe and meditate, the more God was connected. I was connected and he was talking to me and sharing with me. And so I ended up getting rid of all my furniture, giving my kids furniture, getting rid of stuff. I gave my house up. I moved in with my mother. And within not even a week of giving up everything, trusting God, I got a phone call that said, hey, we found your resume and we wanted to know if you'd be interested in being a traveling trainer. So I'm like, really, what does this entail? So they're telling me, you would be traveling different cities, and it's for Cerner. It's a company out of Kansas City. Now, many years before I even went to college, I wanted to work for Cerner because this was like one of the biggest companies in Kansas City, and they had great benefits. They had, all of that. Well, I had applied for a job there when I got out of school and I didn't get the job. Well, the same job came to me as a contractor. So I was starting out making $30 an hour, traveling all around the United States. And she said, the only thing is we pay for your training, but you only get $10 an hour. Well, that was okay because I was living in my mom's house. I didn't have rent or mortgage anymore. So I moved out and I got this job. I stepped out on faith and said, I'm going to take this position. I was afraid, but I was more excited. And I went to work that day and I gave my notice and they told me I didn't have to come back, that they would pay me for the week. So I ended up starting with this job. It was hard because all the kids in my training class, they were 20s and 30s. I was in my 40s and I'm sickly and I have a learning disability. I have all these things going on, but I'm determined that I am going to persevere through this situation. And guess what? within a week of me being in that class, they found out my history and where I came from in patient accounting for 20 something years. They gave me an assignment before I was even done with training. Massachusetts, 11 weeks. And I remember not having a computer, not having no money, not having anything, no luggage. And my mother, she went and she pulled money out of her retirement, and she went and got me luggage. She went, and my mom really stepped up and stepped out for me. She helped me buy a computer. She did everything. She was my saving grace. My mom, rallied behind me. At that point in my life, my mother had found God. She had been in church for some years. When my sister passed away, all things that were old and stale and negative were no longer. My mom stepped into a newness of God, and she became a loving Christian woman, a lot of forgiveness. It took about a year after my sister died, but a lot of forgiveness ensued, a lot of conversations, a lot of growth. And so I can tell you that when I finished that program, you know how the devil is. He'll try to put a kink in your slinky. Not even me walking out of class, I started having problems with my eyes. The next day I couldn't see. And I was supposed to be on a plane on Monday morning to go to Massachusetts. I was in the ER and they told me I was going blind. They told me I was not going anywhere, that I was not going to Massachusetts. And I said, I'm going to Massachusetts. They said, no, you're not. I remember sending me home and telling me that I had to go back to the ophthalmologist on Tuesday. And I said, I won't be here on Tuesday. I will be in Massachusetts on Tuesday. So this was a Saturday night. I called my primary care doctor and said, I need some antibiotic drops. Go look at my ER visit. They didn't give me anything. She called me in the drops. I picked them up on Sunday morning. I started using them. By Monday morning, when it was time for me to go to the airport, I could see, even though my eyes still hurt, they still were blurry, I could see. By the time I got to Massachusetts and using the drops, I was able to do my class. I was able to do my materials. I was able to do everything.
Amen.
And so God brought me out of that circumstance. The devil tried to stop me, but I was faithful. My insurance stopped on Sunday, so that was the last day I could have got the medicine for little or nothing.
Yeah.
What God has for you is for you. I've learned that with my whole heart. And so that first time I went to Massachusetts, I stayed over the weekend because I didn't want to travel back home, because my first time being on a plane in 10 years, it was hard for me to walk through the airport, so they had to wheelchair me. And then as I got a little bit better, I had a cane. And then after a while, that cane got folded up and put in my bag, and then I was walking. So no matter how I got there, I got there. And as I built up my stamina, I didn't need the wheelchair no more. I didn't need the cane no more. I was walking on my own 2 feet back and forth to different airlines and airports and big, huge places. And I still had pain every day, but it took a back seat to my life. And I remember the first time on a weekend being in Massachusetts and driving, and I had the window open and I started crying. And that was the first time I felt free. No pressure, no emotional or mental pain, no abuse, no nothing. I felt free for the first time in my life. And I knew that everything God told me about going to Florida was going to come to pass, because I had friends that tell me for years, you ain't going nowhere, girl. You ain't going nowhere. And I would say, yes, I am. God told me I'm going to Florida, and it's going to be in October. And every year, October would come and go, and they would say, you still here? And I said, yep, and I'm still faithful. And so I worked that for 2 years. And then in 2017, I got a job in Florida. Started October 16, 2017.
Amen. That shows
And so I
you.
went back to them friends and said, remember when I said that I was going to be in Florida in October? I had a lot of trials and tribulations with how I've been here. You know my story about being bullied and all of that. But I know that I was supposed to go through that too, because how can you identify when you are a child of God and you're a positive person? You have to experience negativity to know why positivity is so important, and how you move through the negativity to get to the positivity, and how you make the decisions on what you do in this negativity and how it impacts you in your
Correct.
life. And you're learning. And as you're learning and you're using this platform, you're teaching other people. Well, I'm sharing with you, I'm struggling with this. Don't put me on a pedestal because I'm going to fall off. I am still learning. Yes, I do have bad words. I pray every day and ask God to take them away. But so, there's all these things that I'm learning. And you have to encourage yourself and talk to yourself, and you have to work through, because you want to pop off and tell these people to go someplace.
Yeah.
You want to fight them. You want to lash out at them. And so these are things that I'm learning as I go along that I have to do in order to be a better Michele, a better Casey. And I struggle. I'm not going to lie. I struggle because I know the type of person. I used to be a hardcore person that would not take no stuff from people. And so to come from that to this, I can't let those people let me go back to where I used to be. So I battle with that spirit right now. I've been battling. I for years, this lady's been attacking me, and she's back attacking me again. But it's different this time.
Yeah.
It's different. So I can say in my 50s that I have so much more going on in my life that's positive, that I made up with my oldest son last year. We had some difficulties. He was drinking. He was going through some things. And we can't judge people about what they go through. All we can do is love on them, pray for them. And I told him, I said, I'm always here for you and I love you. And we got through that. My mom, same way. We got through it. And so me going home this past December, God said, I need you to go home. 2021 is the year of restoration. So I need you to go home and restore the relationships. I need you to create things for you as far as restoring your faith, restoring your life, restoring your channel, restoring the things that you have let go of and that you need to pick back up, because I gave them to you and you laid them down. So I need you to restore. So 2021 is the year of restoration.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I remember when you talk about it, I was like, this is so powerful. It is good to know what God says and to do it. And this, when I heard the restoration, I say, you understand your
Yes.
assignment.
I just remembered, like, I've been on so many assignments. Rochelle, I've had so many assignments. I'm currently on an assignment right now. God gives me these assignments, and that's something I'm supposed to learn, and that person is supposed to learn. And so I've been through so many of them, but the last one before this one, I went home. My kids weren't speaking to each other. My mother wasn't speaking to my son. Everybody was discombobulated and separated. Me going home brought everybody together. My oldest son and my youngest son lived together in harmony. The oldest one, because the youngest one still has special needs, he's showing him. He bought him a car. He's showing him. I told him, I said, all you have is each other here. I'm not here. So you need to not be separated. You need to be together.
Right.
And so they are together. My mom, everything is coming together the way it's supposed to. And so all I can say is thank God for being obedient to his word, because You know, he's the driver in my life.
Yeah, you've been through all of that from a little child to now to learn the lessons that he wanted you to learn, because right now you're supposed to help. You're supposed to share and
Yes.
help.
I just have one regret in my whole life. I have one. I've guarded my heart so much in my life that I didn't allow whoever God sends to me in I literally shut every man down. I don't know if he was God led him or what it was, but I know that the men that I had chosen in my life through the years were not. I chose him. God didn't choose him. And so I went through celibacy, and I'm celibate now because I'm waiting for my husband, and so it's really hard out here to date, COVID and online dating, and I work from home, and so being exposed and being out with people, it's kind of hard to meet people. And so I've been really just staying steadfast and patient, and I know that God is going to send my husband to me.
Of
um,
course.
and so, but the one thing I say is I'm like, okay, so did I already meet him, Lord? And you're gonna have to send him back around.
He might
Exactly.
be just 2 blocks away from you. You never
Absolutely.
know. He might be in another country. You never know. He might be in
Absolutely.
another state. You never know. I was just here when you getting married, right? When you just send me the
I
pictures.
claim it and receive it in the name of Jesus. I know as many
Amen.
things that he has already revealed and showed me. I know
Yeah.
that's coming because he already told me. He told me you gonna go to school. He didn't get, it's in God's time and not in ours. When he told me you're gonna go to
Exactly.
school, buy a house, and get married, it wasn't gonna be in a year, 2 years, 5 years. But literally, I graduated, got a
Mm-hmm.
house. I've been a homeowner. I'm trying to be a homeowner again, and then get married. And so I know that it's gonna come because God has He's already put that in my life. He's already
All right.
spoke it into my life. So I had to learn the lessons I needed to learn on how to be a good wife, how to be a good mate, how to be a good
Right.
person, how to trust, with how can I, if you are blocking out God's love and you're not giving no love, you know what I mean? How can you love somebody else? So the thing is, I had to go through this whole process of change and evaluating who I was and bettering myself so that I can be a better person to my mate. So I know that was, God don't put together no trash. So whatever he puts
Exactly.
together, and let no man put us under. So we gonna just say that, we claim and receive it. I already know it's already done. It's just waiting on the Lord and his time.
Amen. Okay, this last question for you. What do you pray for Michelle's future?
I pray for good health. I went through my weight loss journey. And so I pray for mental stability because I still struggle with food every day. It doesn't go away after you have weight loss surgery. That's something you have to fight every day. So, good health, strength, and just asking God to take away the weaknesses of my heart so that it'll make me a stronger person. Um, take away any habits that are not of Him, because I know that we all sin every day, but
Mhm.
just asking Him to give me more strength and to be able to overcome a lot of things that I struggle with in my life right now. Getting better every day. Just being a better person, being a better mother, being a good person to mankind. And that's where the hashtag unconditional love, not hate came from the lady who, bullied me.
Mhm.
Even though she's a bully, I still pray for her. I pray for my enemies. I pray for the people that don't know any better. I pray for the people that feel, because, she has a huge platform and she's using it for bad. And I pray for those people because I have no control over what they think about me. That's their problem. But I still have to pray for them and I still have to love them. So that is some major growth for me, because before, when people did me wrong, I would throw you away. I would ignore you like you didn't even exist. And I could literally walk past you like you didn't even, like you weren't even alive. And that is not a way to be. We have to love our neighbors despite the faults. You have to love on them, hug them. That not, you may not forget what they did to you, but you still have to love them. You can't hate anybody. And so these are things that I've learned over the years, and I'm grateful to have come out of that circumstance on top of where I actually do have God's love in my life.
So it's good that you have recognized that be, having that feeling of anger is not good for you mentally and your spirit. So it's good that
And
you,
health wise,
yeah.
and
So,
the crazy part is that because of the cortisol level,
mhm.
if I even look at a bad, like a video about me that they made about me, my blood pressure goes up to like 150 over 110. So I have to keep myself calm and relaxed and try not to like give into those things, because that could cause me a stroke. That can cause me a heart attack, which I've had one before. You know what I mean? I've had a heart attack because of stress, of seeing all this stuff going on in my that people are trying to do to me. So I ended up having a heart attack. And so I know that I have to keep myself and figure out ways to keep myself calm, cool, and collected. And I can't allow myself to get, into that mode of, being hateful or mad or cussing or acting a fool or going off and all these things, because that's not good for me. Or even like engaging them. I want to make a video. I have a lot of proof that I didn't do none of the stuff that they did, but to put it together, I would have to watch their videos, and I don't want to do that.
Mm.
I would have to put all these clips together, and it's just for what? To prove that I didn't do these things because they said I did? Is it worth my life? Is it worth my stress?
Right. Well, I always say the Lord always vindicates his children. So now I'm giving you the platform to tell people about your channel and whatever else you have going on.
So everybody, I want to say thank you to this beautiful soul here for allowing me to be on her channel. So I feel that it's important that the good outweighs the bad. And on this platform, us coming together more, connecting more, unifying in the community of positivity, it will obliterate the hate and the negativity and all of the stuff, because people love drama. But we want to show you that drama shouldn't sell. It should be positivity. If you started having positivity in your life and it's infectious, and then, you start thinking differently and you become more successful and you have more confidence, and you step out on faith, you believe in faith. And, when you start, it should be contagious. And so being able to be here and sharing, and even when we did the Empowerment of Others conference, that just, these are things that I used to do on my channel when I first started, and I kind of fell away and I kind of just went quiet. And so I'm so grateful and happy to actually be back on YouTube actively, sharing God's love, sharing, a conversation with my sister here, and to be able to, share on my platform. So my channel is KC Detox Diva. I am on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as KC Detox Diva. My videos, I have reviews on my videos. I have Unity in Prayer. Well, now it's called Unity in the Community. I put out videos of, things that to help people aware. I give resources. I'm going to get back to doing more natural things on my channel and detoxification of mind, body, and soul on my channel. And so I am grateful to say that God brought me out of a circumstance where I wanted to cancel my channel, but I'm back stronger than ever. And I'm going to I'm not going to let anybody steal my joy. So I want to thank you,
Amen.
Michelle, for allowing me to be here and speak my truth.
Oh yes, you was to be on my show.
I appreciate it.
You was. I am so happy that you agreed to be on the show, and I hope that whatever Casey said, you have put it in your mind. You might be going through something, but it will not be forever, and
Yes.
you can come through it, and you could
Yes.
show others they can come through
Yes.
whatever it is. You are strong enough. Thank you, my sister, my friend. I love
Yes.
you. Love
Love you
you.
too, girl.
Thank you, viewer, for being here. I hope you have been inspired beyond measure. Till we meet again next week, have a blessed week ahead. Bye bye.